They thought he was cursed. The boy was no older than 12, strong for his age, sharp-eyed, always the first to lift the stones and the last to leave the quarry. But on the 23rd day of the temple's foundation work, he collapsed, not from exhaustion, not from heat, but from something none of the priests could name. His face turned ashen, his breath grew short, and when he was carried to the healer, he began to murmur things, names, shapes, words in a tongue no one recognized. His arms twitched, his fingers clawed at the air, and his eyes were no longer his own. The priests feared contamination. The elders whispered of possession, but the workers, hard men, sun-worn and silent, refused to go near him again. Even when he was brought food, no one touched the bowl afterward. They said the shadow that fell across the boy that day had never left. They said the stones themselves rejected his hands, that the temple would not rise while he lived. The boy, whose name was Adair, was taken to the king, not because they hoped for healing, but because they had run out of fear. And the king was Solomon. Yes, that Solomon, son of David, the wisest man said to ever live, the man who built the first temple with cedar from Lebanon, bronze from Tyre, and gold from Ophir, the man whose prayers brought fire from heaven, the man who, according to scripture and shadow alike, was given more than wisdom. He was given command. Of what? Well, that depends on which version you read. Before we unravel the mystery of Solomon's ring, the 72 spirits, and the forbidden manuscript buried by time and trembling hands, I want to ask you something. Where are you watching from, and what time is it right now? Drop your location and local time in the comments. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, because what you're about to hear has been hidden, denied, and even banned across history. And if this story grips you, already share it. One share brings this secret closer to the light. Finally, confirm for me in the comments. Do you understand the mystery hinted at in this title? Let me know. Now, let's return. Solomon had the boy brought before him in secret. No trumpets, no robes, just silence. He dismissed the guards, dismissed the priests, and waited until only he and the boy remained in the royal chamber. Adair lay on the stone floor, unmoving, but when Solomon knelt beside him, the boy's eyes opened. He did not blink. He did not look away. And then, in a voice too deep to be his own, he said, "The builders will not finish. Not while I stand. I drink from their breath. I twist their sinews. I stand in the cracks of the stone and whisper ruin. I am the first." Solomon did not speak. He simply stood, walked to a carved box of cedar wood, and withdrew a ring. It was not large. It did not shine. But when he raised it, the air shifted. The ring bore a seal, a mark etched not by mortal tools, but by something older. It shimmered faintly with unseen flame. The moment it was raised, the boy screamed not in pain, but in protest. His body contorted, and from his mouth poured a voice that did not belong to any human tongue. The room darkened, the walls pulsed, but the ring stayed raised. And then, silence. The boy collapsed again. Solomon placed the ring back in the box, sealed it, and called for his scribes. "What did you do?" one of them asked. The king answered, "I did not heal him. I bound what was inside him." End quote. The scribes pressed him further. "What was it?" And Solomon said, simply, "A demon." And this was the beginning, not of the temple, but of a war beneath the stone. A war hidden by gold and prayer. A war still whispered in the corners of forbidden scrolls, dusty manuscripts, and apocryphal texts the faithful were told to forget. And it begins here with the Testament of Solomon. Night settled over Jerusalem like a velvet curtain, casting long shadows over the palace walls and quieting the noise of the city. But inside the royal chamber, Solomon could not rest. The boy Adair had been freed from his torment by the power of the ring, but Solomon's peace had not returned. In the days that followed, more workers fell ill. They whispered of unseen watchers, of cold hands gripping them in their sleep. The air around the temple site grew heavy, as if something ancient and malevolent clung to the very stones. And though the ring blazed with divine authority when raised, Solomon realized with rising dread that he still did not understand the true depth of what he had begun. This was no longer about labor. This was a confrontation with the invisible. He had been given a weapon but not a map. He returned to the mount where the temple was being built. This time not as king but as supplicant. Alone, he walked the length of the unfinished walls, placing his palm against the warm stone, feeling the vibration of something deep below. It wasn't just illness. It was war, not of armies and arrows, but of wills and spirits. He knelt among the rocks, his robes heavy with dust, and prayed not for dominion, not for miracles, but for vision. Lord of my fathers, he whispered, you gave me wisdom. You gave me this ring, but I do not know how to use it well. I face things that were cast down before time began. I am but a man. Show me what I must do. And then, as it had happened once before in the stillness of night, the wind shifted, the sky trembled. A light bloomed in the air, neither flame nor sun, but something brighter than either. A voice filled the mountain not with words alone, but with presence. And once more, the archangel Michael descended. His form did not walk, but glided. Robes, shimmering with stars, each step echoing as if across eternity. Solomon fell flat to the earth, face down, overcome by awe. But Michael's voice was steady, calm, commanding, yet tender. Do not fear, son of David. You were chosen for this. You prayed, and you were heard. And because you did not ask for power, but for clarity, I have returned with what you need. Miller. From within his robe, Michael withdrew a scroll. It looked simple, aged parchment sealed with wax, inscribed with characters from no tongue Solomon knew. Yet he understood their meaning as if they were written on his heart. This is the commandment over spirits, Michael said. This is the celestial decree that binds those who fell from light. With the ring and these words, you may command not only the demon you see, but those who hide, those who deceive, and those who rule legions. Solomon touched the scroll, and as his fingers brushed the wax, the seal glowed. He felt a jolt, not pain, but revelation. He saw visions, names, faces, creatures with wings like shadows and tongues like fire, legions, countless and waiting. The scroll was not ink alone. It was a living document of spiritual warfare. But Michael was not finished. You have already seen the face of one. That was Ornias. But he is only a scout. There are 71 more, princes of fire, beasts of air, spirits of plague and madness. They gather even now beneath the earth, called to this place by the temple's rising. It is not just stone you build. It is a threat to their dominion. They fear the light that will dwell here, and they will do all they can to stop you. Solomon raised his eyes. Then why give me power to build something that will provoke them? Michael's expression was unreadable. because the presence of the Lord must dwell among his people, and because the darkness must know that even rebellion serves the will of heaven. Later, the archangel then reached forward once more, placing his hand upon Solomon's head. The ring is not your strength. The scroll is not your shield. Your strength is in obedience. If ever you wield these tools as if they belong to you, they will turn to dust. Remember this always. Solomon bowed again, the truth of those words striking deeper than the ring's power. He had been granted authority, but it was borrowed. His task was divine, but his success would not be his own. It would belong to the one who sees all, judges all, to commands all, the one whose voice had summoned light at the beginning of time. Then Michael added one final thing. The next spirit is already on his way. He does not know yet that he will kneel, but he will. Go now, and stand ready. And with that, the light folded in upon itself, and Michael vanished as swiftly as he had come. Solomon was left alone, but not alone. The scroll now rested within his cloak, the ring upon his hand, and in his chest, a quiet certainty. He had been heard. He had been equipped, and he would not face the darkness as a man, but as a servant of the Most High. As he descended the mountain, dawn began to touch the sky. The city below stirred. Fires were lit. Carts rolled into the streets, and the hum of life resumed. But on Mount Moriah, something had changed. The temple would not be built with mortal strength alone. From this day forward, it would rise by the labor of spirits, some willing, most not bound, not by chains, but by the seal of heaven itself. Solomon returned to his palace, but he did not call his council. He did not summon his architects. Instead, he waited in silence, listening. That night, as the shadows lengthened and the stars emerged, a strange sensation filled the air. The temperature dropped, the oil lamps flickered, and somewhere, just beyond the garden wall, something moved. The next demon had come, and the war was about to begin. The night Ornias returned, Jerusalem slept unaware that the boundary between the seen and unseen was about to be torn open. Solomon did not summon guards. He did not bring priests or singers or symbols of ceremony. He came alone, wearing the ring, carrying the scroll, and trusting only in the authority that had been given to him. The house of the young builder lay quiet, lit by a single oil lamp that trembled as if sensing what was to come. Adair slept on a thin mat, his breathing shallow but steady, the color slowly returning to his face since the spirit's first banishment. Solomon sat near the wall, listened, waiting. He did not wait long. As the night deepened, the air thickened. The lamp dimmed, and then the cold arrived. It was not the cold of wind or weather, but the absence of warmth, as if life itself had been drawn from the room. Adair began to twitch, his fingers curling, his lips parting in a silent gasp. A shadow pooled in the corner of the chamber, darker than darkness itself, stretching and thinning like smoke pressed flat against stone. Solomon rose slowly, heart pounding, but his hand did not shake. He lifted the ring, the seal catching the faint light, and spoke the words Michael had given him. The sound was not loud, yet it filled the space, vibrating through bone and breath alike. By the name of the Lord God of Israel, I command you to reveal yourself. The shadow recoiled, collapsing inward, then bursting outward into form. What stood before him was neither man nor beast, but something that borrowed features from both and belonged to neither. Ornias was tall and thin, his limbs too long, his joints bending at wrong angles. His skin shimmered like oil on water, never quite settling into one color. His eyes glowed a sickly yellow, and his mouth, when it opened, revealed too many teeth. He screamed as if burned, falling to his knees, clawing at the floor. "The seal," he hissed, "the cursed seal. Remove it, and I will leave. I swear it." Solomon stepped closer, his voice steady, measured, unafraid. "You will speak first. You have been draining this boy." "Why?" Ornias writhed, but could not rise. The ring held him like chains forged of light. "Because he builds," the demon snarled. "Because every stone he lifts wounds us. That place must not be finished. The light that will dwell there will scorch us." Solomon felt a chill, not of fear, but of realization. This was not random torment. It was resistance. The temple itself was a beacon, and the darkness had responded. "You will not touch him again," Solomon said, "and you will answer every question I ask." Ornias laughed weakly, a sound like glass breaking. "You think you command me, King of Dust? I serve a master far greater than you." Solomon raised the ring, the seal blazing brighter. "Then you will tell me his name." The demon convulsed, his form flickering. At last, broken by the authority he could not escape, he whispered it. "Beelzebub, Lord of the Flies, Prince of those who fell." The name hung in the air like poison. Solomon had heard it before, in fragments of old stories, warnings half remembered. Now it was no longer a myth. It was an enemy. Ornias slumped, defeated, his strength spent. Solomon did not banish him. Instead, he did something no man had ever done before. "You will work," he said. The demon's head snapped up, eyes wide. "What?" Solomon's voice did not rise. "You will labor. You will lift stone. You will cut and carry and build. You will undo the harm you have done by serving the purpose you despise." Ornias screamed again, but this time not in rage, but in terror. To serve was humiliation. To build the dwelling place of the God who cast them down was agony beyond pain. Yet the seal allowed no refusal. Slowly, shaking, Ornias bowed his head. "As you command," he whispered. Before dawn, Solomon led Ornias from the house and through the silent streets. The demon moved like a shadow barely tethered to form, shrinking from the light as the sky began to pale. At the foot of Mount Moriah, Solomon stopped. "You will bring me others," he said. Ornias froze. "If I do, they will destroy me." Solomon met his gaze. "If you do not, I will bind you until the end of days." The choice was no choice at all. Ornias nodded, trembling. "Then follow," he said, and turned toward the Valley of Tombs. They passed beyond the city gates, into a place no living man walked at night. The tombs yawned open like broken mouths, carved into stone, remnants of generations long gone. The air was heavy with silence. Ornias stopped before a sealed entrance and raised his clawed hand. The stone rolled aside with a grinding cry, revealing darkness that seemed to breathe. Solomon stepped forward, lifted the ring, and spoke with authority that was no longer tentative. "Beelzebub, I summon you." For a moment, nothing happened. Then the darkness moved. It coiled, rose, and took shape. Beelzebub emerged not as a beast, but as a fallen angel, tall and regale, his beauty ruined but not erased. His eyes were black, endless, and filled with ancient hatred. He smiled. "So," he said softly, "the wise king has learned our names." Solomon did not flinch. "You will answer me." Beelzebub laughed, a sound rich with mockery. "Answer. Yes. Obey. Perhaps. Love? Never." Solomon's grip tightened on the ring. "How many serve under you?" The demon's smile widened. 72. "Prince. Each commanding legions. You wish to command them all?" Solomon answered without hesitation. "Yes." The air trembled. Beelzebub studied him for a long moment, then inclined his head. "Then you have invited war into your house." He raised his hand, and the valley filled with movement. Shapes emerged from stone, from air, from shadow itself. Some small, some towering, some winged, some faceless. 72 princes of darkness gathered, their attention fixed on the ring. Solomon stood alone before them, mortal flesh against ancient power. Yet none advanced. They recognized the seal, and they feared it. "You will build," Solomon said, "stone by stone, beam by beam, until the house of the Lord stands complete." A murmur rippled through the host, anger and resentment woven with dread. One by one, they bowed, not in reverence, but in submission. Ornias collapsed to the ground, spent, his task complete. Solomon turned back toward the city as dawn broke fully over the hills. Behind him, the demons followed, and with that silent procession, the impossible began. As the sun cast golden light across Mount Moriah, the city of Jerusalem stirred to life. But what its citizens did not see was the host of darkness, now marching under the command of a single man. Solomon, son of David, walked before them, ring gleaming with divine fire, scroll sealed within his robe, and a certainty in his step that no king before him had known. Behind him followed the 72, princes of old, spirits whose names were once carved into the memories of the stars, now bound to build the dwelling place of the Most High. Their forms shimmered between shapes, some humanoid, others monstrous, flickering shadows of rebellion pressed into reluctant servitude. The workers had not yet arrived. Solomon had ordered them to remain in their homes for 3 days. What was about to happen was not for their eyes. Beelzebub, tall and draped in ash-black robes, stood to the side, arms folded, eyes burning with a cold disdain. "You command us," he said to Solomon, "but do you understand us?" Solomon turned to face him. "I do not need to understand your fall to direct your hands. You will work, not speak. The time for rebellion has passed." The prince of demons smiled faintly. "We shall see." Solomon raised the ring. At once, the host was still. The power of heaven surged through the seal, an invisible command that tightened the air like a storm about to break. Then Solomon began. He called them forward, one by one, beginning with those who had caused the greatest disruption. Ornias, the first spirit to fall under the ring's authority, was assigned to lift stones and carve the foundation. "Your claws will cut what your lies tried to undo," Solomon told him. Ornias nodded silently, his face unreadable, then descended into the quarry to begin. Next came Baal, a 3-headed demon who shifted shape with every breath. One moment he was a king, the next, a cat, then a bloated toad with eyes of gold. He bowed low, hissing through 3 mouths at once. I am Baal, Prince of Invisibility, Teacher of Secrets. Solomon pointed toward the interior walls. Then you will teach the masons how to seal every seam, how to place each block so perfectly that not even the wind can pass between. Baal hesitated. The seal flared. He bowed again and obeyed. Solomon continued, assigning tasks as a general deploys soldiers. Each demon's domain became their punishment. Those who once incited war were ordered to guard the peace of the builders. Those who spread disease were bound to protect the health of the laborers. Those who deceived kings now recorded measurements with divine accuracy. Every spirit that once corrupted was now directed to purify. The temple's rising was not just construction, it was exorcism in stone. Agaris, an old man with the gaze of a hawk and a crocodile for a mount, introduced himself as a breaker of thrones, a sower of confusion among languages. I watched the Tower of Babel fall, he said with cruel pride, and laughed. Solomon answered, then you will inscribe the words of the law upon the walls. You will write them in every tongue, for all to read. The tower you helped bring down will rise again as a temple of understanding. Agares growled, but accepted his task. Even the most ancient defiance faltered before the seal of the living God. Every night, Solomon sat in a newly carved chamber near the temple site. One by one, the demons entered, announced themselves, described their powers, and were given commands. Vasago, who knew the past and future, was sent to locate perfect stones buried deep beneath the mountain. Samigina, a grotesque creature with the head of a horse, taught the arts and sciences to the architects, whispering forgotten wisdom into their ears. Marbus, who could both cause and heal disease, was restricted to nighttime labor only, moving massive blocks within human strength, but forbidden to come near the human workers. None resisted for long. Those who tried found themselves silenced by the fire of the seal, their forms twisted by agony until they submitted. Solomon, though mortal, stood as judge over creatures whose lives had stretched back to the dawn of creation. And the strange thing, perhaps the most unsettling, was that the system worked. The construction, which had been delayed by illness and fear, now advanced with supernatural speed. Stones fitted so perfectly they needed no mortar. Cedar beams floated through the air, borne on invisible wings. Metal was shaped in forges that burned with unearthly heat, tongues of fire whispering ancient names. Still, Solomon did not trust them. Every assignment was guarded by watchers, human scribes, and chosen Levites who recorded the tasks, double-checked the measurements, and prayed unceasingly as the demons labored. Every stone was purified before placement. Every tool was anointed. The holy work was surrounded by layers of prayer, sacrifice, and vigilance. Solomon knew this power was not his own. It was borrowed, and anything borrowed must one day be returned. But not all the spirits were easily categorized. Some walked into the chamber not with menace, but with curiosity. One, Barbatos, appeared as a bearded man who spoke the language of animals. He listened to birds and understood the rustling of leaves. He seemed almost gentle. I have no hatred for your God, he said, only grief. I remember his voice. Solomon paused. He had not expected such sorrow. Then serve, he said quietly. Let your memory guide your hands, and you may find peace in your labor. Barbatos bowed low and was sent to the forests to guide the cedar harvesters, ensuring no tree fell in vain. In those early weeks, the temple rose not just in size, but in spirit. The work was precise, efficient, Filled with a strange, reverent energy, the demons spoke little, their eyes ever fixed on Solomon's ring, the seal that burned when defied. And yet beneath it all, there was tension. The workers still did not know the full truth. They saw strange things, shadows moving without wind, voices speaking in forgotten languages, tools that moved as if by unseen hands. But Solomon kept them in the dark. For now, they must only believe in progress. They must not yet know what walked beside them. Beelzebub, though bound, watched everything. He spoke rarely, but when he did, it was always with precision. "You cannot chain us forever," he said once. "Even stone will crack." Solomon answered, "You will serve until the last stone is placed." The demon smiled faintly. And after? Solomon gave no reply. He did not know. But in his heart, he began to wonder, could a temple built by fallen hands still be holy? Or was this act, this merging of heaven's command and hell's labor, an offense waiting for its consequence? For now, the work continued, faster than any construction in history, more precise than the most skilled architects could imagine. And beneath it all, a tension grew, like a string pulled tighter with each passing day. Solomon stood at the center of it all, a man with a ring, a scroll, and a task too great for any mortal. He did not know how the story would end. He only knew that the temple must rise, and the spirits who once waged war in heaven would now raise its walls. At dawn, a silence unlike any other settled over Mount Moriah. Not the silence of emptiness, but a breathless pause before something ancient moved. The workers, summoned by the king's decree after 3 days of strange delay, climbed the mountain with uncertain steps. They expected chaos, sickness, abandonment, but what they found left them stunned. The foundation of the temple had doubled in height. Stones once impossible to lift now stood precisely in place. Timber beams rested perfectly aligned, already shaped, smoothed, and sealed. Gold fixtures gleamed in corners no hammer had ever touched. It was as if the mountain itself had risen in the night and offered its bones to God. No one spoke. The men stared, blinking in disbelief. The air was charged not like lightning, but like breath held by the divine. Solomon stood before them, dressed not in royal robes, but in the garments of a laborer, dust on his cloak, stone dust on his hands. He did not explain. He only said, "The Lord has heard our prayer. You are no longer alone in this work. Do not fear what you may see, but keep your eyes on what you are building." And with that, the work resumed, but it was not the same. The workers, now watchful, saw strange things moving at the edges of their vision. Tools floated, chisels carved with invisible hands, and unseen voices murmured commands. When they blinked, the shapes vanished. When they turned, the air was still. But the work advanced faster than ever before. By Solomon's design, no demon was permitted to labor alone. Each spirit worked beside a human, invisible to them, yet mirroring their movements, doubling their speed, whispering truths of geometry, balance, tension. Masons found themselves guided to cuts so precise they could not explain their own skill. Carpenters lifted beams they swore would crush them, only to find them weightless at the right moment. Metal workers forged without sparks, the flames of the forges oddly silent, the coals glowing with an eerie blue instead of red. No man spoke of it aloud, but all felt it that they were not alone, that hands not of flesh were building beside them. Solomon, meanwhile, kept his vigil. Every day he walked the site, ring blazing on his hand, scroll in his robe. Each night he met with the spirits, calling them one by one to receive new commands, and they obeyed, each more reluctantly than the last. Some muttered in tongues older than stars, others hissed beneath their breath, but all bowed, for the seal burned if they disobeyed. And though they hated the work, the temple's rising was unstoppable. Beelzebub, forced into the role of foreman, watched his kin with a mix of rage and dark amusement. "You think this pleases heaven?" he said one night as he walked beside Solomon through the half-built inner court. "You think these stones will shine brighter because they were lifted by cursed hands?" Solomon did not look at him. "God's will is not fragile," he said. "Even rebellion bends to his design." Beelzebub smiled bitterly. "And yet, it is not his name they fear when they bow. It is yours." Solomon stopped. For a moment, silence stretched between them. Then he whispered, "That is the most dangerous truth I have heard today." The prince of demons said nothing. He only laughed softly and vanished into the shadows. But the work continued, and the structure itself began to change. It did not merely rise. It resonated. Each stone, each beam, each measure of gold seemed to hum with purpose. Birds no longer nested nearby. Animals avoided the mountain. Even the wind passed around it as if bowing in reverence. The people of Jerusalem, curious, he began to gather at the base of the mount to watch. They saw little, only the silhouettes of workers, the gleam of copper and gold, the sound of hammers with no echo. But something in them shifted. They spoke less of construction and more of prophecy. "The temple is alive," they whispered. "It breathes." Very so. Still, none knew the full truth. That the very spirits who had once defied God's throne now labored beneath the sun to raise a monument to his presence. Solomon told no one. The priests had suspicions. The scribes who copied the plans had seen things they could not explain. But the king kept his silence. He knew the line he walked was perilous. To speak too soon was to risk chaos. To delay too long was to court disaster. And so he walked the middle path, letting truth bleed out like oil through stone slowly, carefully, silently. One evening, as twilight fell and the city's lamps began to glow, Solomon climbed the scaffolding alone. He stood upon the highest platform, looking out over the construction. The temple's shape was nearly complete. The outer courts had formed. The pillars had been set. The Holy of Holies was marked, its space untouched by any hand, mortal or otherwise. And in that silence, Solomon felt something stir within him. Pride, not the corrupt kind that boasts, but the deep satisfaction of divine purpose unfolding before his eyes. He, a mortal man, was overseeing the impossible. He had taken what was broken and forced it into alignment. He had bound darkness to build light. But even as the pride rose, so did a warning, a soft whisper, not in his ears, but in his soul. Remember the words of Michael. The ring is not your power. The scroll is not your shield. Solomon pressed his hand to his chest, grounding himself. Not mine, he whispered to the wind. Only borrowed. Lays. And the mountain, as if in answer, gave no reply. The days that followed saw wonders beyond description. The sea of bronze was cast and placed, its 12 oxen shining like molten gold. The inner walls were carved with angelic forms, each one traced by hands that had never known light. The lampstands were shaped, 7 branches for each, their flames ready to be lit with sacred fire. The air inside the rising temple began to feel different, denser, deeper, as if time itself moved more slowly within its walls. The demons grew quieter. They no longer hissed in open defiance. Their movements became smaller, more careful. Some looked at Solomon with something akin to awe, though never reverence. They had expected punishment, chains, banishment, but instead, they were made builders. Their rebellion, turned against them, was now serving the very God they had once defied. But Beelzebub watched it all with knowing eyes, and though his mouth was silent, his thoughts were loud. Let him believe he commands us. Let him raise his perfect house. Let him forget the warnings. Let the pride grow. Let the ring feel lighter. Let the prayers grow shorter. And when the last stone is placed, the first crack will form. And so the temple rose on the backs of shadows and the will of a mortal, built by unseen hands, guarded by ancient promises, and watched by enemies who had learned that victory never comes all at once. It comes slowly, silently, stone by stone. As the walls of the temple neared completion and the sound of hammers faded into the rhythm of purpose, Solomon noticed a strange shift in the air. The spirits under his command, once defiant and full of venom, began to move with a new stillness. Not reverence, no demon bowed in awe, but with a cautious deference. They were waiting, not out of respect, but fear. It was during one of these silent evenings that she appeared. Not summoned, not called by the ring. She came on her own, and her presence made even the dust recoil. Her name was Enepsigos. Solomon first saw her as a woman, cloaked in robes of deep violet, eyes darker than obsidian, and hair that shimmered like moonlight on still water. She stood at the edge of the labor site, motionless, watching as the spirits carved angelic figures into gold panels. The other demons moved aside without a word, creating a silent path between her and the king. Solomon knew, even before she spoke, that she was no ordinary spirit. There was power in her silence, a depth that mirrored his own dreams. But when she finally spoke, her voice did not match her form. It was layered 3 tones at once, like 3 women speaking as one, echoing each other in unison and contradiction. "I am Enepsigos," she said, "of the 3 forms. I am maiden, mother, and crone. I am the moon, but I have kissed the sun. Its stool." Solomon lifted the ring. The seal glowed, but not as brightly as before. A flicker, a hesitation. It was not resistance, it was recognition. "You were not summoned," he said. "Why do you come?" Enepsigos smiled, and her face shifted. Her skin darkened, her hair curled. Then it lightened again, her eyes changing shape and hue. She was now young, then old, then timeless. "Because you are building a house meant for one God," she said. "But he is not the only one who watches." "Is ready," Solomon frowned. "You speak blasphemy." "We can so." She stepped closer. "Do I? Or do I speak truth buried beneath your scrolls?" Her presence was seductive, but not in the way men feared. She was knowledge wrapped in flesh, mystery given form. She did not tempt Solomon with beauty. She tempted him with understanding. And that, for a man of wisdom, was far more dangerous. He lifted the ring again. "You will name your nature." "May," she laughed. "I am the triple goddess of the moon, the spirit of the tides, the change that comes, whether men accept it or not. I have been called Hecate by the Greeks, Isis by the Egyptians, Lilitu by the Babylonians. I whispered in dreams when the stars were young. We have the coming oath. The ring burned brighter. Inepsigos flinched. You are not goddess. Solomon said, you are fallen, a deceiver. Writers, her smile faded. All who fall once stood, and then, softer, even kings. There's not as with them. The air thickened. Solomon felt the temperature shift as clouds drew over the sun. It was not night, but it felt like twilight. A shroud passed over the mountain, and shadows lengthened unnaturally. Even the demons stopped their work. Beelzebub, watching from a high perch on the scaffolding, tensed. Inepsigos raised her arms. You seek to bind the world in one name, but names are mirrors, and mirrors can shatter. Look at me. I am all that is change, and you are trying to build permanence, a temple that will not last. End quote. Solomon stepped forward. Ring raised high. You will not speak such things in this place. With a could difference of that to Dom, but she did not move. Instead, she began to change again. Her face split, not in pain, but in unfolding. She became three women standing as one. The first was young, eyes wide with secrets. The second bore a crown. Two, regal and firm. The third was old, her face etched with the lines of time, mouth turned downward in sorrow and certainty. Together, they said, you cannot bind what was made to turn. Man's complete. Solomon struck the seal toward her with authority. The ring flared, and the echo of angelic fire roared through the sight. Inepsigos screamed not from pain, but from memory. She fell to one knee. The other demons turned away. You will work, Solomon said. You will carve the images of the heavens into the dome of the holy place. You will trace the stars into gold, and you will do so in silence. Raider, she lowered her head, but even in submission, she smiled. And what of the sun? Solomon, she whispered. When it sets, will you still be king? He ignored her. The power of the seal flared again. She vanished in smoke, drawn to her new task. But that night, Solomon dreamed. In the dream, the temple was complete. The pillars gleamed. The ark was in place. The people rejoiced, but the sky turned black. And from above, the moon descended, not silver, but crimson, and from within it came three voices, speaking in unison. You command demons. But who commands you? Solomon woke, covered in sweat, the ring heavy on his hand. The next day, Inepsigos did her work. She carved the constellations with perfect precision. She traced the zodiac with trembling gold, and above the holy place, a dome took shape that mirrored the heavens themselves, stars, moon, sun, all sealed in sacred form. The priests were astonished. They had never seen such craftsmanship. They praised the king, but Solomon said nothing. He looked at the dome and wondered, not for the first time, if it was truly the sky they had captured, or something older. Beelzebub came to him that evening. She is dangerous, the demon said. Solomon nodded. I will watch her. Beelzebub offered. Solomon looked at him with a strange smile. And who watches you? The demon only laughed. The temple rose higher. The dome was completed. The courts were filled. The laborers marveled at their progress. The people began to gather each evening, singing psalms from a distance, watching light catch on polished gold. But high above, beneath the holy dome, Inepsigos worked in silence, whispering to herself names that Solomon could not hear. names that had not been spoken in Israel, names that echoed from the days before Adam. And in the back of Solomon's mind, the dream returned. 3 voices. 1 question. You command demons. But who commands you? Solomon had begun to sense that each demon brought before him carried more than malice. They carried memories, old knowledge buried beneath centuries of rebellion. They were fragments of a war that began before the world had shape, and their powers reflected not just chaos but echoes of the divine they once served. And now, as the temple's ceiling was finished and its walls enclosed the sacred air within, a new group approached. They came not from below, but from above, from the stars. The night sky shimmered differently in those days. The constellations did not merely tell time, they spoke, sung, warned. The ancients had called them the Decans, 36 spirits who ruled the night sky in shifts, each reigning over 10 degrees of the zodiac wheel. But Solomon had not summoned them. They came of their own accord. One night, as he stood alone beneath the dome adorned with celestial gold, he heard a strange humming not from the earth, but from the heavens. The stars above the mount shone with unnatural brightness, and from the sky, figures descended like burning wheels, like spirits born of light and shadow entwined. They did not look like demons, yet they were not angels either. Their forms shimmered between man, beast, and symbol, each a living emblem of the forces they governed. The first spoke, its voice like wind swirling through stone corridors. We are the Decans, guardians of the night sky. You call forth powers that reflect our order. We have come to see the temple you raise. Moses, Solomon, stunned but unshaken, raised the ring. The seal responded dimly, not in command but recognition. These beings were not bound by rebellion but watched over time, cycles, and the turning of fate. Are you servants of God? He asked. The Decans smiled, not in joy, but in mystery. We serve the pattern, and the pattern begins and ends in him. One by one, they descended, 36 in all. Some took the forms of men with burning eyes and skin like bronze. Others had wings of fire, serpents coiled around their arms, or crowns made of stars. A few looked like animals wrapped in human thoughts, lions with the speech of sages, oxen that quoted scripture, and eagles that sang riddles. Solomon stood among them, the ring glowing faintly, the scroll fluttering inside his robe as if aware of their presence. Why do you come now? He asked. The temple is nearly complete. One answered, because your labor has tilted the heavens. What you build echoes beyond the earth. The arrangement of stone affects the stars. Your temple is no longer a structure. It is a mirror of the sky. And Solomon, in that moment, saw what they meant. The layout of the temple, its chambers and courts, formed a reflection of the constellations. The Holy of Holies aligned with the pole star. The great pillars mirrored Gemini. The outer courtyards traced the paths of the sun and moon. He had not planned it this way, not consciously, but perhaps the knowledge had been whispered to him by the spirits, or planted by the hand of God long before his birth. The Decans, now standing in a perfect circle around him, began to chant not in Hebrew, but in a tongue older than Babel, older than Eden. It was a song of alignment, of cosmic balance, of time sealed in gold. Solomon did not understand the words, but he felt them. His blood warmed, his vision sharpened. The dome above seemed to pulse, and the stars carved into it shimmered with new life. The Decans then revealed their purpose. We are the keepers of timing, one said, eyes like eclipses, Your temple must not merely be built, it must be activated in the right hour, the right season, under the right stars. If you fail, the veil between worlds will tear. If you succeed, it will hold forever. Another stepped forward. We will mark the threshold. We will inscribe upon the lintels the signs of heaven, so that the light of God may descend without distortion. Solomon bowed his head. Then I accept your guidance. And for 3 days and nights, the decans worked. They did not lift stone or shape wood. They spoke. They walked the temple's lines, sang to the bricks, whispered to the pillars. The priests, watching from afar, heard them but could not understand, and trembled. When the 3rd night passed, the sky over Jerusalem gleamed like polished bronze. The stars aligned. The temple's walls glowed faintly with warmth that did not come from the sun. Solomon stood at the altar. Alone, the decans circled him one final time. You have built a gateway, one said, not just between man and God, but between time and eternity. Keep it pure. Another leaned close, its voice as soft as dew. Beware those who would twist what you've made. The same stars that guide also burn. Then, as suddenly as they had come, the 36 decans vanished, ascending into the heavens like sparks drawn into wind. The temple was quiet, but its silence was new, charged, filled. The workers returned the next day, unaware of what had happened in their absence. They only knew that the golden dome seemed brighter, that their tools worked smoother, that they could breathe deeper, and that the king's eyes now glowed with a strange clarity, as if he had seen behind the sky. Solomon said nothing of the decans, not to the priests, not to the scribes, not even to the spirits he commanded. Some truths, he now understood, were not for scrolls. They were written in stars and spoken only once. But that night, Beelzebub approached him. You've aligned your house with heaven, he said, voice slow and thoughtful. How curious. I once stood among those stars. Read and watery stew. Solomon didn't answer. You think the sky cannot fall, the demon added. But it did once, and it can again. Well, still, Solomon was silent. He looked at the temple, at the dome overhead, at the stars beginning to rise. And he prayed not with words, but with breath, with stillness, because he now understood. He had not built a house. He had built a throne, and thrones are always contested. Each evening, as the sun slipped behind the hills and cast Jerusalem in hues of flame and shadow, Solomon withdrew from the noise of the laborers and entered the chamber carved into the rock near the temple's base. It was here that he conducted his interrogations, an unseen court where spirits were summoned one by one, compelled to speak truth under the fire of the seal. These were not conversations, not mere reports of labor. These were confessions, declarations, warnings. The demons came not only to serve, but to speak. And what they spoke echoed with revelations that trembled on the edge of heresy and prophecy alike. Solomon called forth Ammon, a spirit who came as a raven-headed man cloaked in blue fire. Ammon, when pressed, admitted to having whispered into the ears of kings long dead, urging war where peace would have prospered. Why? Solomon asked. Ammon did not blink. Because blood is more fertile than water. What is planted in soil soaked with grief grows stronger. Solomon ordered him to carry water for the temple's purification rites, forcing him to cleanse what he once corrupted. You will pour what you once spilled, Solomon decreed, and the demon bowed. not in obedience, but in bitter submission. Then came Ornias, who spoke with a voice so gentle that even the priests passing near the chamber paused. As if soothed, he had once taught men the secrets of herbs, the paths of healing, and the mixtures of immortality. But he had also taught poison. He smiled as he told Solomon that he could extend life, even beyond the natural span, if the right words were spoken. And at what cost? Solomon asked. Ornias smiled. Weeder, memory. A man who lives too long forgets who he is. Solomon bound him to teach only the healing arts and forbade him to utter a single word about death's delay. Man was made to return to dust. The king said, "We are not gods." It ceases. Night after night, the confessions deepened. Each demon had a domain, an origin, a purpose. Some were born from the fall, others from the rebellion of men. Some were ancient watchers who had once stood in the courts of heaven before choosing desire over obedience. And many, to Solomon's surprise, still bore the scars of their choices, not physical, but spiritual. He saw it in their eyes, in their silences, in the moments when they paused, caught between memory and madness. One such spirit was Balaam, who came as a man with 3 heads, one human, one bull, one ram. His body was strong, but his eyes held sorrow. "I saw the earth from the clouds," he said. "Before your ancestors drew breath, I walked among the stars, and now I carry stones for a house I may never enter." Solomon asked what he feared. Balaam did not hesitate. Oblivion, to be forgotten, to labor without meaning. Solomon's voice was steady. "Then your work now will echo through time, not as praise for you, but as proof that even the fallen may serve the holy." Everyone sended clotion, but not all confessions were sorrowful. Some came with venom, proud of their chaos. Raum, who once caused cities to burn and families to turn against each other, admitted to engineering the destruction of entire dynasties through whispers in court. "Chaos is the truest form of freedom," he said. Solomon's reply was cold. "And yet here you are, speaking truth because the seal commands you." Raum's grin faltered. Truth, it seemed, was the first chain. As the days passed, Solomon began to notice a pattern. For every demon who corrupted, there was an angel who had once stood against them. Names whispered in tandem. "I was bound by Raphael," one muttered. "Michael cast me down," said another. "Uriel watches, even now," hissed a third. These names echoed like thunder in Solomon's mind. The scroll Michael had given him began to glow more often, its characters shifting like fire. When he touched it, he saw visions of heavenly courts, of burning swords, of thrones carved from light. It became clear each demon had a counterpart, a judge, a reminder that their rebellion had not erased their origin. So Solomon began to write these truths, organizing them into a sacred index. For every demon, he recorded not just their name and power, but the angel that opposed them. The book began to grow more than a ledger, more than a list. It was a spiritual map, a revelation of the balance between darkness and light. Some of the scribes who copied these records trembled as they wrote. "Is this not dangerous?" "My lord," they asked, "to know the names of darkness so well," Solomon answered. "We cannot defeat what we do not understand, and we cannot fear what we have bound." Now, still, the lines between obedience and curiosity began to blur. One night, Solomon summoned a spirit named Asmodee. who wore the form of a giant with serpents for legs and fire in his mouth. He was said to cause lust, to break marriages, to twist love into obsession. "Have you no shame?" Solomon asked. Asmodee's reply was chilling. "I only fan the embers that already smolder in men's hearts. I cannot burn what is not already dry." Solomon's voice cracked like stone. "Then you will carry timber. You will serve what was built to last. Its place." The interrogations became rituals in themselves, sacred inversions of confession and command. And yet, with each one, Solomon's heart grew heavier. These spirits, though bound, spoke with such clarity. They knew man's weakness intimately. They did not tempt through force, but through understanding. And Solomon began to ask questions not aloud, but within. Why were they allowed to fall? Why were they not destroyed? Why were they still here? The answer came in a whisper, not from a demon, but from within the scroll one quiet night. Because even the enemy serves the plan. Instructed, it was then that Solomon realized the temple he was building was more than a monument. It was a battlefield, not of swords and shields, but of ideologies, of repentance, of justice, of whether light could truly be born from hands that once shaped darkness. And he began to wonder, would the people of Israel understand what they now walked among? Would they still call it holy, if they knew who had laid its stones? As the temple rose in structure and sanctity, Solomon's understanding of the invisible realm deepened. He had come to see that the labor of demons was more than brute strength. It was informed by knowledge strange, ancient knowledge. They carried in their twisted minds echoes of the divine architecture they once served, long before their rebellion. And now, under the weight of the seal, they were forced to build again, though every brick laid was a reminder of what they had lost. But there was something else, something even Solomon had not anticipated. Tools began to appear. Not tools made by men, but strange devices conjured by the spirits themselves. It began with Marax, a bull-faced spirit who once taught astronomy in the old world. He asked for permission to shape a measuring rod of light. At first, Solomon was cautious. The seal glowed faintly in warning, but did not flare. "Explain," the king commanded. Marax replied, "There are lines in heaven that guide the lines of earth. This rod aligns the stones to the stars. Without it, what you build may endure, but it will not sing." Solomon granted the request, and the next day, Marax produced a staff of copper, etched with symbols that shimmered and shifted. When placed between two stones, it made them resonate. The builders noticed it too. When they used it to set blocks, the joints locked so tightly no blade could pass between, and from deep within the stone came a low hum, like the earth exhaling approval. Word spread quickly among the spirits. One after another began to request access to ancient tools, each unique in form and function. One spirit conjured a triangle that could project a shadow perfectly straight, even in moonlight. Another created a compass that floated in midair, its arms suspended without string or chain. A third produced a brush of flame that could smooth marble without charring it. The human workers, wide-eyed, observed but never touched. Solomon forbade them. "These are not gifts for mortal hands," he said. "They are reminders of what lies behind the veil." Well, but the temptation was real. One of the younger masons, a boy named Eliab, it was caught trying to mimic the flame brush using a heated tool of his own. It burned the stone black. That night, he fell ill. When Solomon questioned the spirits, one Valifor admitted. He tried to steal what was never his. The tools listened. They obey only the blood of heaven or the breath of ruin. Solomon knelt at the boy's side and prayed. He did not call on the seal. He did not summon a spirit. He simply asked God to spare the child. By morning, the fever broke, but the lesson lingered. The tools were not neutral. They were extensions of the spirits, remnants of a higher order, twisted by fall and bound by force. Some radiated warmth. Others pulsed with cold. Some responded to sound. Others to thought. One spirit, Glacia Labolas, brought forth a stone hammer that could split rock not by impact, but by song. When he struck it against stone, he did not hit. He hummed, and the block fractured cleanly, like ice splitting under sunlight. Solomon, watching from a distance, felt awe and unease in equal measure. Beelzebub, ever watchful, offered his own insight. "These are the tools we once used to shape the stars," he said. "Not all rebellion was forged in war. Some of us fell because we loved creation too much and sought to shape it without permission." Solomon stared at him. "Then this is not technology," he said. "It's worship corrupted." Beelzebub nodded. "Precisely. Bailos, despite their origin, the tools served their purpose. The temple advanced faster, more perfect than any mortal effort could achieve. No measurement failed. No corner stood crooked. The air inside the holy precincts took on a weight, a resonance, as if reality itself was folding in to witness its own reflection. The priests began to notice the change. The altar stones, once cold, now retained warmth after sunset. The great basin for purification seemed to shimmer even before water was poured in. "This place is alive," one Levite whispered. Solomon did not correct him. But still, the king kept record. Every tool, every function, every spirit responsible. He wrote in coded language, known only to him and two scribes, bound by oaths of silence. The record grew into a second scroll, less a journal, more a manual, a map of forbidden implements built with materials no smith could name and power no scholar could measure. There were limits. Of course, Solomon never allowed the tools into the Holy of Holies. That place, still unsealed, remained pure. No demon crossed its threshold. No device shaped its walls. Its materials were cut by mortal hands, laid by human labor, and prayed over with tears and ashes. The spirits respected the boundary not out of reverence, but fear. They sensed something beyond even the ring, a presence that could not be bound, only obeyed. Still, questions grew in Solomon's mind. Where had these tools originated? If the fallen once used them to shape the cosmos, who had given them such power? Had these objects been gifts of the Most High, later perverted? Or had they been crafted in imitation tools of rebellion, not worship? He took his questions to Michael in prayer, but the angel did not come. Only silence, only the faint warmth of the scroll. One night, Solomon asked a spirit named Ornias, who took the form of a man wrapped in chains of iron and fire, what the greatest tool ever lost was. The spirit answered without hesitation, "The name of God, spoken truly." With that, all things obeyed, even us. Solomon felt the weight of the answer like stone on his chest. And where is it now? The spirit's flames dimmed, hidden, for if it were spoken again, nothing would remain the same. It is a mountains. And so Solomon continued his work, surrounded by devices that defied explanation. He marveled at their precision, their beauty, their terrifying elegance. But in his heart, he knew he was walking a line thinner than the edge of a blade. One slip, one moment of pride, one belief that he had crafted these wonders, and everything could unravel. The tools were not gifts, they were loans, and the borrower was still being watched. The labor on the temple had progressed from stone and silver to something more elusive atmosphere. There was a shift not only in what was built, but in how it felt. The wind that once swept down Mount Moriah had changed. No longer random, no longer merely weather. It moved with a strange rhythm, a whispering pattern as if carrying messages rather than air. Solomon noticed first during the third week of the upper court's elevation. He stood on the scaffold alone, surveying the golden fixtures and cedar beams, when a gust struck him not with force, but in tension. It circled, halted, then passed through him like a voice too old to form words. He turned. Nothing. No worker. No spirit in visible form. Only wind. But it had watched him. That night, he entered his chamber and summoned the spirit known as Aseliel, one of the less hostile entities bound to his service. Aseliel had once governed over desert winds and tempests. He had been blamed in ancient days for sandstorms that buried armies and tornadoes that scattered cities. Now, with the seal's light burning on Solomon's ring, Aseliel bowed. "The air shifts," Solomon said. "It speaks. Is this your doing?" The spirit, whose form shimmered like heat rising from stone, responded with surprising humility. "No, my king, the wind you hear is older than I. It is the breath of another one who comes from the waters." "Dumasdane," Solomon frowned. "A sea spirit?" "Not one you command," Aseliel whispered, "but one that answers only to balance. She has seen the temple rise, and she approaches." The king stood, robe trailing behind him as he moved to the window overlooking the city. In the distance, the faint gleam of the sea could be seen far beyond the hills, past the valleys, a blue horizon veiled in haze. The Mediterranean, the cradle of storm and song. "Then call her," Solomon said. "Summon her name." The spirit hesitated. "She does not come when called. She comes when questioned." End quote. 3 days passed. On the fourth, the sea itself sent an answer. It began with fog, not morning mist, but a deep, silver fog that crept through the city streets as if searching. By mid-afternoon, it had reached Mount Moriah. The workers paused. Tools hung in the air mid-stroke. Even the demons grew silent. A coolness settled, not cold, but damp, clean, primal. And then came the voice. It was not heard through ears, but felt in the bones like the vibration of a storm beneath the skin. "I am Rahav," it said, "the deep that was before the land. Who raises this throne of gold on my breath?" Solomon stood at the temple gate, ring held aloft. "I am Solomon, son of David. The house is not for me, but for the Most High. I do not build on your waters. I build on his word." The fog thickened. The pillars of the temple vanished behind the mist. The air became heavy with salt and memory. And then, from within the mist, she formed. Rahav took no single shape. One moment she was a serpent of water, flowing in the air like a ribbon of lightning. The next, a woman cloaked in sea foam, her hair trailing behind her like waves across sand. Her face shimmered with many expressions: rage, curiosity, grief, pride. She spoke without moving her lips. "This house will change the sky," she said, "and if the sky is altered, the sea will not remain untouched." Minus, Solomon met her gaze. All things under heaven must bend to the Creator's will. She laughed, and it sounded like the crash of waves. Even demons speak of your obedience, but your temple reaches into places not meant to be touched. She stepped toward him. The fog receded. The gold of the temple gleamed once more. You command spirits. You measure stars. Now you think to bind wind and sea. Solomon said nothing. He understood the accusation hidden within her words, not pride, but presumption. I have not summoned you to war, he said, only to ask, will you oppose this work? Rahav's form flickered, shifting from beauty to terror, tentacles for fingers, eyes like whirlpools, a crown of crashing tides. Then, again, she softened. No, she said. Not yet. She extended one hand, and in her palm, water formed into a perfect sphere. Floating, within it, tiny silver shapes moved, boats, birds, waves crashing against unseen shores. This is the breath of the sea. If ever your temple disturbs its balance, this orb will shatter, and with it, the calm. Where's? She handed it to Solomon. The moment it touched his hand, it turned to crystal cool, smooth, pulsing faintly. A covenant, a warning. As Rahav began to fade, she spoke one final time. The temple will be finished, but it will not be the end. Only the center. Do not forget. What is built on land echoes through water, and what stirs in water can drown kings. Then she vanished, the fog retreating like a tide pulled back into eternity. The workers resumed their tasks in silence. The demons watched Solomon with something new in their eyes, not fear, not loyalty, but awe, for he had spoken with Rahav and survived. That evening, Beelzebub appeared beside Solomon at the top of the eastern wall. You now hold the covenant of the sea, he said. Do you know what that means? That I am trusted, Solomon replied. Or that you are being watched, the demon whispered. Even angels tread carefully where Rahav walks. Solomon turned, ring gleaming. So should demons. This meted dominant. Beelzebub laughed, but did not respond. Solomon placed the orb within a sealed chamber deep beneath the altar above the roots of the mountain. Yet below the feet of the people, there it would remain, pulsing gently in the darkness. A reminder that the temple, though holy, was not above creation, but within it, balanced on breath, surrounded by currents, dependent not only on stone and fire, but also on wind and wave, and he prayed that it would never shatter. The temple rose with a kind of divine rhythm now, its stones harmonized with the stars. Its chambers breathed with wind and sea. Its gold reflected the covenant of heaven. And yet, as the final walls neared completion and the last pillars were carved with angelic forms, a shadow crept behind the majesty. Solomon felt it in the quiet spaces between commands. It lingered in the corners of the court, where no wind moved and no shadow should be. It was not doubt, it was threat. The spirits had labored under the seal. Yes, but beneath obedience was hatred. Beneath submission was memory. And not all would wait to be freed. It happened during the preparation of the holy place. Solomon had declared that only spirits who had proven unwavering obedience would be allowed near the inner sanctuary's foundations. He summoned 6 of the most trusted to oversee the stone-laying. Among them was one who had never drawn suspicion, a demon who had spoken little, obeyed quickly, and worked tirelessly. His name was Harbonel. He appeared as a tall, silent figure with robes of sand and hair like ash. He claimed to have once stood in the court of Gabriel and fallen not by choice, but by grief. I loved too much, he had said in an earlier confession. I wept for man before man was made. It's so. Solomon had pitied him. And now, Harbonel stood within the sacred court, lifting stones with unseen hands, whispering words of alignment and purity. But something was wrong. One of the priests, Eliakim, noticed it first. As he approached the inner sanctum to offer prayer, he felt a chill, a sudden drop in temperature that had nothing to do with weather. His knees buckled. He looked up and saw Harbonel not working but standing motionless before the veil. Eyes locked on the Holy of Holies. There was no humility in his gaze, no reverence, only hunger. Eliakim fled and warned Solomon. The king returned at once. Ring ready. The moment he stepped into the court, the air broke, splintered like glass. Harbonel turned, and the form he had worn evaporated. In his place stood something vast and serpentine, a body wrapped in wings like torn parchment, eyes like black suns, a voice like thunder inside stone. I have served enough, the thing roared. I will not carry gold when I once bore light. Solomon raised the ring, and the seal ignited. But Harbonel did not bow. Instead, the demon lunged. The impact sent the king crashing into a pillar, the sound of splintering stone echoing through the court. The workers scattered. The priests screamed. The sky darkened. Harbonel surged forward again, his voice layered in 1,000 echoes. You command us with a tool you do not understand. You wield glory as if it were your birthright. You are flesh. Solomon struggled to rise, the ring burning against his skin. He reached for the scroll, but it had fallen, tumbling across the stones. Harbonel loomed over him now, clawed hands raised, fire burning in the slits of his eyes. The temple's inner sanctum shimmered behind him, its purity untouched but near. Solomon closed his eyes and whispered, Michael, Mace, and then came the light. It did not fall like fire. It erupted like sunrise. From above the veil, from the very roof of the sanctuary, descended a figure clad in flame and silence. Michael, Prince of Heaven, landed between Solomon and the demon with the weight of heaven in his stride. His sword neither metal nor flame, but a concept made form, struck downward and pinned Harbonel to the stones. You dare, Michael said, voice flat. Eternal. Harbonel screamed, twisting, his form unraveling. I served once. I loved once. Why should I be cast down and this man lifted up? Michael's wings extended, because he remembers who gives him power. You forgot, Devry, and then, with a motion like thunder swallowing thunder, the angel drove the seal of the living God into Harbonel's chest. The demon howled its cry, so full of loss that even the demons working far below paused in silent dread. Harbonel's body vanished, not into smoke, but into silence. Bound, not banished, not destroyed, locked beneath the altar itself, sealed in stone, made to sleep in eternity beneath what he had tried to defile. Michael turned to Solomon. You gave your trust too freely. Solomon bowed his head. I tried to show mercy. The angel's gaze was unreadable. Mercy without wisdom is betrayal. You must know their names, but not trust their tears. Solomon nodded slowly. He understood now. The temple was not just a house, it was a battlefield disguised as beauty. Every stone bore a cost. Every nail had passed through the hands of something that once stood in glory and fell. That night, Solomon returned to his chamber in silence. He placed the scroll beside the ring. He did not speak, not even to pray. Instead, he opened a new page in the hidden book. He wrote the name of Harbonel. He wrote what he had become. And beneath it, he wrote a single sentence in trembling script. Some spirits wait, not for freedom, but for revenge. No, the next morning, the work resumed. No one spoke of what had happened. The priests avoided the holy place for 3 days. The demons labored in tighter formation. Beelzebub, for the first time, offered no comment. But as Solomon passed him at sunset, the prince of demons said quietly, "Now you begin to see." Over. Solomon did not respond. He simply walked on, past the blood-washed stone, past the broken pillar, and into the temple still rising. And the ring once warm felt a little colder on his hand. In the hierarchy of darkness, there were many who whispered, many who plotted, and many who obeyed only because the seal of God demanded it. But there was only one whose silence struck fear even into his own kind, Beelzebub, prince of demons, lord of the flies, once a throne-bearer of heaven. Solomon had heard his name from the first day. Ornias knelt before him. But Beelzebub had waited, watching the temple rise from a distance, assigning lesser spirits to work, never speaking unless addressed. He obeyed but never submitted. He bowed but never looked away. And Solomon, for all his wisdom, had postponed what he now knew was inevitable. A direct confrontation, not of labor, but of truth. It was dusk when Solomon summoned him not with the ring, but with a word. "Come," he said, standing alone within the chamber where the scroll was kept. "I am ready." Beelzebub entered without sound. No footsteps, no wind, just presence. He wore the form of a tall man cloaked in black and gold. His eyes bottomless wells of knowing. His hair was the color of dying embers. His hands long and pale, as if they had once shaped stars. He stopped 10 steps away from the king and waited. Solomon did not lift the ring. He did not speak in command. He simply asked, "Why did you fall?" The demon did not flinch. "Because I remembered who I was." With a darkled, Solomon nodded. "And who were you?" Beelzebub's voice was low, but it rang like iron through the chamber. "A servant of fire, a bearer of light, a voice in the choir that sang when the foundations of the world were laid." Velated. "And why leave that?" Solomon asked. Beelzebub's eyes narrowed. "Because we were told to bow to clay." Boos. The room grew colder. "I watched him craft man from dust." The demon continued, "And I saw weakness, mortality, fragility. We, who had endured for ages, were told to serve this creature born of breath and mud. It was not rebellion. It was refusal to kneel before a mirror. Solomon's fingers tightened around the edge of the scroll. "You speak as if creation was an insult." "Oh, go." Beelzebub's expression did not change. "It was a test. And we failed. Not because we hated him, but because we loved him too purely. We believed he had erred." He stepped forward. "Do you not wonder why we were not destroyed? Why we remain?" Solomon raised the ring slightly, but did not strike. "Because even your rebellion serves his purpose. Most." A flicker of something amusement, regret, crossed the demon's face. "That is what terrifies me most." Said. Silence filled the room, a silence too vast for any chamber. Then Solomon spoke again, more softly. "Why do you obey the ring?" Beelzebub looked directly into his eyes. "Because it bears his name. Because the seal was carved not by angel or man, but by the breath of the word itself. It is the echo of the command that shaped the heavens. Even we must bow to that. Reasoned, were those a number that tender? Even you, Solomon asked. Beelzebub stepped closer, and for the first time, Solomon felt something shift within the air, not menace, but magnitude, a truth too large for comfort. I do not bow to you, King of Israel. I bow to what you carry, but I watch you, and I wait, because I know how pride feels. I know what it whispers. Meased, Solomon did not respond. He understood that this was no longer interrogation. This was a mirror. Why have you come now? The king finally asked. Beelzebub walked to the edge of the chamber, eyes tracing the carvings on the wall, names of demons, orders, dates, functions, the ledger of the temple's shadow side. Because the temple is nearly complete, and you have not yet asked the question that matters. To have a gross, Solomon blinked. What question? Beelzebub turned, his voice colder than winter. What happens after it is finished? For a long moment, Solomon said nothing. He had focused every ounce of strength on the building, on the labor, the spirits, the measurements, the prayers. But now the question echoed in his mind like a bell struck in a cavern. What happens when the last stone is set? The demon stepped closer. You believe this structure will protect your people, that the presence of God will descend and dwell, that the ark will rest in gold and fire, and peace will reign. But I have walked this path before. They turn, ween for me so using do speed. Solomon looked up. With Lucifer, and coming, Beelzebub's voice dropped to a whisper. We, too, once built a temple, not of stone, but of praise. We, too, believed we were unshakable. Isdade had put, and now you serve here, Solomon said. The demon's expression grew grim. Yes, not because we were forced, but because we were woven into the pattern, and in that pattern, rebellion is not error. It is mirror. It is. Solomon stepped back. You speak in riddles. The samely dated. No, Beelzebub said, and his voice trembled with a power that made the torches flicker. I speak in warnings. It dissed a tone. Then, without another word, he turned and walked toward the shadow of the archway. As he faded from view, he said one final thing, so softly that even the ring seemed to dim in response. You build a house for God, but every house casts a shadow, and someday, someone will dwell in that shadow. And Cresios. Then he was gone. Solomon stood alone, heart pounding, ring pulsing faintly. He looked at the scroll, still glowing with holy fire, and he asked the only question he had never dared to voice. Is this power a gift or a test? There was no answer, only silence, and the slow, steady heartbeat of the temple under his feet. As the final veil of the temple was prepared and the Holy of Holies neared completion, Solomon grew restless. It was not the fatigue of labor, nor the pressure of command. It was something stranger, deeper, like a whisper that circled his thoughts but refused to speak clearly. He felt the weight of what he had built, of what he was becoming. The more perfect the temple rose, the more haunted he felt by the question Beelzebub had left him with. What happens after it is finished? He began to sleep less. His prayers became quieter, more inward, and at night he would sit in the chamber of the scrolls, the ring resting on his hand like a silent flame, and stare into the polished bronze shield hung upon the wall. It was not meant to be a mirror, but in its curvature, in its light, He had begun to see flickers, images that did not belong to the present. One night, the images grew clearer. At first, just shadows, a city burning, a man weeping alone on a broken throne, priests scattering like crows, then faces his own, older, worn, and yet somehow unrepentant. And beyond it all, a figure that stood in the ruins of the temple he had not yet finished. It wore his crown, but not his spirit. Its eyes glowed, not with wisdom, but with hunger, and it smiled. Solomon staggered back, the vision fading. He pressed his hand against the wall to steady himself, his breath shallow. Then came the voice. "You saw him," it said. Solomon spun. The room was empty, but the voice continued. "The shadow of your legacy. That, oh never mating." From the far side of the chamber, smoke curled into form. A new spirit, one not summoned, not named. It took the shape of a man draped in blue and silver, his body shifting with the movement of water, his eyes like glass reflecting lightning. He bowed low but with mockery in the bend of his spine. "I am Dalkiel," he said, "spirit of sight, prophet of paths not yet walked." "Is Reikenden," Solomon lifted the ring. "You were not summoned." "Wintigramzo." "No," Dalkiel said. "But I was seen, and now that you have opened the door, I have come through." Bessie, the ring flared, but the spirit did not flinch. Instead, he stepped forward, brushing his hand over the polished shield. The surface rippled like water, and new images formed futures. Alternate timelines, broken possibilities, a temple looted, a nation divided, a scroll burned, a crown falling from a lifeless hand. Solomon's heart clenched. "These are lies," he said. "These are seeds," Dalkiel replied, "planted not by me, but by you. Makkahs, I have followed God's command." Solomon whispered. Dalkiel smiled, and so did Lucifer until he didn't. "When has it genes?" The ring flared brighter, and Dalkiel hissed, drawing back. "Careful, King. Too much truth, and the seal might question you too." "End well." Solomon stepped forward, fire in his voice now. "Why show me this?" "Because you asked," the spirit replied. "You looked into the mirror, and mirrors do not show what you want. They show what is possible." End quote. Solomon gritted his teeth. "Then I will change it. I will not be the king who forgets." "To be Ain." Dalkiel's expression changed. For the first time, a flicker of respect. "Then listen," he said, "because it begins not with failure, but with satisfaction. When the last stone is laid, when the praises rise, and the priests declare you blessed, that is when the danger truly begins. Not in your strength, but in your stillness." "Is a brute." He walked around the room, his footsteps leaving no sound. "You have conquered spirits, aligned stars, commanded those who once defied heaven, but you have not conquered yourself." 18 Telva mastered. Solomon's hand tightened on the scroll. "Is that what you came to say?" "No," Dalkiel said. "I came to offer a gift." "Man." He reached into his robe and pulled out a shard of obsidian, jagged, glistening, sharp, a mirror, one that shows not the future of nations, but the future of hearts. Solomon did not reach for it. Dalkiel tilted his head, afraid. "I fear only God," the king replied. "Good," Dalkiel whispered. "Then fear what he sees when he looks at you." And with that, he vanished, leaving behind the obsidian shard on the table beside the scroll. Solomon stared at it for a long time. He did not touch it, but he did not destroy it either. Instead, he called for the priests. That night, a new chamber was sealed beneath the Holy of Holies. Within it was placed a box, bound in iron and gold, inscribed with no name. Inside the box, the mirror shard, the scroll's original fragments, and the first tools ever conjured by the spirits. It was to be opened only by a future king in a time of ruin. He prayed it would never be needed. But as he knelt before the altar that evening, hands raised, voice trembling, the wind outside carried a whisper not of praise but of warning. Even the wisest may fall. Leavened, the temple stood on the edge of completion. Its outer courts gleamed. The golden vessels were in place, and the Holy of Holies awaited the Ark of the Covenant. From sunrise to twilight, the laborers moved in harmony. The demons labored in silence, and Solomon oversaw it all with a gaze sharper than ever. Yet, beneath the order, a tension built. It was as if the temple itself knew that its sanctity was being tested, as if something had been invited that could not be dismissed. Then came the night the sword appeared. It began with a tremor, not of the earth, but of the air. The wind that passed through the pillars suddenly reversed, moving against itself like breath being drawn in before a cry. The torches flared, flamed blue, and extinguished. The stars above the holy place blinked out one by one, as if veiled by an unseen hand. And then, from the western gate, it entered. The beast stood 10 cubits tall, though its form shifted as it walked. Sometimes it appeared as a man with wings of molten copper, other times a lion wreathed in fire. But always, in its right hand, was a sword made entirely of flame, not burning, but alive, twisting with motion, humming with purpose. Its eyes were not eyes, but windows to an unbearable light, and its feet did not touch the ground, they scorched it. The workers fled. Even the demons shrank back, vanishing into cracks and shadows. Only Solomon stood, ring raised, scroll trembling in his robe. The creature stopped at the threshold of the holy place and spoke not in words, but in the language of judgment. Every stone around him trembled. Every piece of gold groaned. "I am Catherial," it said, "sword of the boundary, guardian of what is forbidden." Solomon knelt. "You are an angel, Dr. Vermezing. I am a flame," it replied. "I stood at Eden's gate when man was cast out. I stand now where holiness meets ambition. That door." Solomon did not move. "Have I overstepped?" The flame moved slightly. "You have approached." Mema, the sword, hummed louder, a frequency that made the bones ache. "The temple is nearly finished," Solomon said, "but the ark has not yet arrived. You block the path. First, I test the door," Catherial replied. "Not all who build may enter. Not all who pray are welcome." "No," Solomon raised his head. "Then test me." Lessened. "Weather am piercings." The flame lowered, but the sword remained bright. "Why do you build?" Solomon paused. He had answered this question many times before to his people, his court, the priests, but never like this. "Because I was commanded." "Id rekas, that is obedience," Catherial said. "Why do you desire it?" Solomon closed his eyes. "Because I want him near." Well, the angel did not respond. The sword lifted slightly. "And why do you wear the ring?" Solomon's hand tightened. "Because I was trusted with it. But it is not mine." "His nose?" "Not anymore," the voice replied. Solomon froze. "What do you mean?" Catheriel pointed the sword toward him. And in that moment, the flame revealed not heat, but truth. Solomon saw himself as he had been, kneeling on the mountain in his youth, asking for wisdom. Then, as he had become clothed in gold, walking among demons, commanding the stars. Then, as he was now haunted, powerful, uncertain. "You speak truth," the angel said, "but truth decays if not renewed." Man, a silence fell, thick as stone. Then the angel extended the sword downward and drew a circle of flame around the holy place. It did not burn, but it glowed bright and absolute. "No spirit may cross," Catheriel said. "No shadow may pass. This is the threshold. If even one hand that touched rebellion lays brick within, the presence will not descend." "Mynes," Solomon nodded slowly. "So be it." Well, the angel turned, his wings unfurling. But before he vanished, he spoke one final sentence. "You have held the line, but the line will not hold forever. Micah." And then he was gone. The next morning, the workers found the circle of scorched stone and did not ask questions. The priests saw the light in Solomon's eyes and dared not speak. The demons did not return to the holy place again. That night, Solomon wrote in the book, "Catheriel's sword of fire, guardian of Eden, now guardian of the ark's house." He underlined the entry twice, and he did not sleep. The temple now cast long shadows that stretched across the hills of Jerusalem. Every morning, the sun struck the gold of its pillars and the silver of its basins, and the light poured down the mountain like fire from heaven. The Holy of Holies had been sealed. The Ark of the Covenant was on its way. And yet, Solomon felt an absence, not in the temple, but within himself. It was as though the ring on his finger had grown heavier, and his soul lighter. Not in joy, but in uncertainty. The workers no longer questioned. The demons worked without complaint. But the king prayed more and slept less. He had begun to feel watched, not by the spirits, but by something greater, something waiting. Then came the night he could not move. Solomon awoke in his chamber to find his limbs frozen, his breath shallow, his vision filled with blinding light. At first, he thought it a dream, but the ring on his finger pulsed with heat, and the scroll beside his bed fluttered without wind. The light grew, and within it, a figure descended not as fire, not as storm, but as stillness given form. "I am Uriel," it said, "flame of God, watcher of gates, bearer of the test." Mementos. Solomon could not speak, but his mind was clear. Uriel did not require speech. His presence poured directly into the soul, bypassing words. "You have built a throne," the angel continued, "but a throne must have a heart. Before the ark enters, before the Lord descends, you must be weighed to Areli Anders." Solomon tried to rise, but the angel's gaze held him in place. "You have commanded spirits," Uriel said. "You have bent fire and wind. You have spoken with sea and shadow. But have you kept the one command that matters?" A burning appeared on Solomon's chest, not pain, but illumination. He saw his memories, not just events, but intentions. His first prayer, his quiet joy when the foundation was laid, his curiosity with the tools, his awe at the deckhands, his conversations with Beelzebub, his fear when Harbonel attacked, his pride when the dome was completed, his silence when the people praised his name more than God's. Uriel showed him everything, not as judgment, but as reflection. "You have not fallen," the angel said, "but you lean." The coast too great. Solomon's heart trembled. I don't want glory, he whispered finally. I want him to come. Os, Uriel stepped closer. Then prepare. You must be stripped of what you think makes you worthy. With the main formendum species of a blood, the ring on Solomon's hand burned with sudden fire. You will not command again until the ark rests inside the veil, Uriel said. You will finish the temple not with fire or force, but with humility. Wend Besitas, Solomon gasped. The ring turned cold. The scroll went silent, and Uriel was gone. The next morning, Solomon said nothing of what had happened. He removed the ring and placed it in a sealed chamber. He closed the scroll and locked it beneath the altar. The demons noticed first. They looked toward him, waiting for orders. But none came. Instead, he walked among the workers, human and spirit alike, and joined them. He carried stones. He polished bronze. He fetched water. The people of Jerusalem watched their king labor beside carpenters and masons without robe or crown. Some whispered, some wept. The demons labored more carefully. And Beelzebub, watching from the highest scaffold, said only, now, he is dangerous, is ready. 3 days passed. On the 4th, the temple was completed. Solomon stood at the summit of the mountain, sweat-streaked, hands calloused, heart quiet. The priests gathered. The Levites sang. The ark approached, carried on golden poles, veiled in white linen, guarded by fire and prayer. And then the wind shifted. The decans reappeared in the sky. The sea stirred in the distance. The flaming circle of Catheriel burned again around the Holy of Holies. And from the clouds, Uriel descended once more. This time, he did not speak. He simply held out his hand. Solomon knelt. Uriel returned the ring. It pulsed, not with fire, but with peace. The seal shone once, then dimmed content. You may lead, Uriel said, because now you follow. Wizendos with the locked diamond, and with that, the angel vanished. Solomon rose, ring on his finger, scroll unopened. Soul bowed, and the ark entered the temple. The ark now rested within the Holy of Holies. The priests had sung. The trumpets had sounded. A cloud had filled the inner chamber, a radiant fog that blinded the eyes and stilled every voice. The Lord had descended. The temple was complete. For a time, there was peace. Solomon walked through the courts each morning and evening, no longer as builder, but as guardian. The people came from every corner of the kingdom to behold the wonder. Pilgrims brought offerings. Foreign kings sent gifts. And the name of Solomon was spoken with reverence in cities far beyond Israel. He had not only built a temple, he had constructed a myth, a sanctuary touched by heaven, a kingdom ruled by a man who had spoken to angels and bound the spirits of old. But within Solomon, something shifted. He no longer heard the voice that once whispered during prayer. The dreams grew quieter. The ring, once burning with command, now sat cool and dormant on his finger, not dead, but silent. He still wore it, still turned it often between his fingers, but he had stopped asking what it meant. Instead, he began to wonder what else it could do. It began with curiosity. Solomon reopened the sealed chamber beneath the altar and retrieved the scroll and the ring's twin, an obsidian shard given to him by Dalkil, the spirit of futures. He placed them on his table and stared. The scroll pulsed faintly. The shard shimmered, and in the glass, he saw not demons, not angels, but himself, older, surrounded by gold, crowned, alone. He closed it quickly and told no one. In the days that followed, Solomon turned his attention beyond the temple. He began new projects, gardens, halls, towers, cities of tribute. The demons were no longer bound to the temple's work, but he did not release them. They were too useful. He assigned them elsewhere, hidden places, secret tasks. Some carried messages, others gathered rare materials. A few built things no one else was allowed to see. His court expanded. Ambassadors came from Egypt, from Tyre, from Sheba, and with them came daughters, princesses of power and diplomacy. He married them, one by one, first for alliance, then for admiration, then for desire, and each brought her gods. At first, the shrines were small, private altars in hidden chambers, incense to Molech, carvings of Astarte, small bowls of wine offered to unknown names. The priests said nothing, the people only whispered, and Solomon, once quick to banish darkness, now ignored it. He told himself it was political, that peace required compromise, that unity meant tolerance. The ring did not glow, the scroll did not stir, but something else returned. Beelzebub. He appeared in Solomon's chamber one night, unannounced, uninvited, yet somehow unsurprising. "You've grown quiet," the demon said. "You once asked so many questions." Welfamsey. Solomon, seated at his table, did not look up. "I've learned all I need." And, quote, Beelzebub approached the window and gazed out at the city. "You've built more than a temple. I've built a kingdom." "No, no," the demon said. "You've built a throne for your reflection." Solomon rose, anger flickering in his voice. "I have obeyed. I have followed. I have sacrificed more than any man." Matters. Beelzebub turned, and his eyes no longer held mockery but pity. "And still, you forget." End quote. You can through the modern to devilment, to meedig dambles, to becoming. Solomon raised the ring. "I have the seal. You will obey me." Note, Beelzebub smiled. "Do you really believe I fear you now?" The air shifted. The torches dimmed. The scroll shuddered. Solomon blinked, and Beelzebub was gone. But the doubt remained. He began to feel it during prayer. A hollowness, a distance, as if his words no longer rose, as if heaven had closed its ears. One evening, he entered the holy place alone. He passed the veil, crossed the golden floor, and stood before the ark. The room was still. The silence was complete. He knelt, whispered a prayer, and waited. Nothing, not warmth, not presence, not even rebuke. He left the chamber with dread. That night, he dreamed of a ring falling into darkness, and laughter. Days turned into weeks. The shrines of his foreign wives grew. The incense thickened. The demons he had bound worked in silence, but their obedience felt different now. Heavy, begrudging, familiar. He stopped wearing the ring in public. The people still called him wise, still brought him gifts, still sang his name. But Solomon could no longer feel the line between reverence and idolatry. He began speaking less of the Lord and more of the temple. He no longer corrected those who praised his wisdom instead of God's presence. And when a child once asked him, "Who gave you the ring?" he smiled and said, "It came to me in a dream." It was a nation. That night, the seal glowed faintly, and then dimmed. Beelzebub watched from the shadows of the court. He said nothing. The temple stood. The people sang. And Solomon, for the first time in years, felt powerful again, but not holy. The walls still gleamed, the songs still echoed, but beneath the golden floors of the temple, something stirred. Not a single tremor, not a shout, but a ripple of silence. The kind that follows after a command is ignored. Deep in the sealed chamber beneath the altar, where the first spirits had once been bound, cracks had begun to form, not in stone, but in obedience. The ring had dimmed, the scroll no longer burned, and the demons, though still tethered by the covenant forged under fire and fear, began to test their bonds. It started with Ornias. He had once been the first spirit Solomon subdued, a creature of shadow and blood. Now, assigned to oversee the maintenance of the temple's subterranean channels. One night, as a Levite entered the lower chambers to check the water systems, he returned with pale skin and trembling limbs. He claimed to have heard chanting low, guttural, ancient words echoing off the stone. Voices, he said, but no one was there. Be portentuant. Solomon dismissed it at first. A trick of echoes, a frightened mind. But then the dreams returned. He saw the foundation stones crack from within. He saw demons gathering not with rage but with purpose. He saw himself surrounded, the ring burning, the scroll unreadable, his own voice unheard. Then came the night of rebellion. Solomon had grown distant from the temple. His duties as king expanded. His wives asked for new palaces, foreign shrines, trade agreements with lands whose gods were not Yahweh. He allowed it all. The prophets warned him, quietly, carefully, but he waved them away. The temple stands. He said, God is with us. No, but God had grown quiet. That night, deep within the earth, the first spirit tore free. It was Habanel, the same who had once tried to kill the king. Long ago, Solomon had sealed him beneath the altar. Now, his prison cracked, not by strength, but by the weakening of the seal itself. Not through force, but through forgotten authority. The scroll had not been opened in months. The prayers had grown shallow. The sacrifices less frequent. The chain of command had loosened. And Habanel remembered. With him came others. Slowly, in silence, they moved Ornias, Raum, Samigina, even Barbatos. Once gentle, not all rebelled in fury. Some wept as they turned. Others simply disappeared. The hierarchy that had once ordered them now faltered. They did not flee the temple. They gathered beneath it, waiting. Beelzebub did not join them. He remained near the throne room, watching Solomon, but his silence said more than any roar. Solomon felt it at last. One morning, as he entered the temple for a routine inspection, the torches would not light. The gold looked darker. The air was thick, not with smoke, but with unseen weight. He entered the inner chamber alone, and there, on the floor, was the obsidian shard, the mirror of futures. He had locked it away. Now it lay at his feet. He picked it up and saw nothing, just blackness. He rushed to the lower chambers, scroll in hand, ring clenched. The gates were sealed, but not with holiness. They were sealed from the inside. He called upon the ring, raised it high. The seal flickered, then faltered. He opened the scroll. The letters blurred, unreadable. The names of the spirits twisted, their symbols distorted as if rewriting themselves. He called for Michael. No voice answered. He fell to his knees in the dark, surrounded by the cold hum of power lost. The priests arrived. The Levites wept, but no one could speak of what they felt. And Solomon, once master of demons, now stood above a mountain whose foundation had turned. The revolt had no battle, no clash of swords, no visible fire. Only the knowledge that below the sanctuary beneath the ark, the altar, and the golden walls something breathed that no longer feared him. They waited, not in haste, not in hatred, but in patience, for the seal had weakened, and every rebellion begins with waiting. Time moved slowly after that night. Solomon no longer walked the temple as he once had. He moved like a man under water, his steps deliberate, his eyes ever scanning the shadows. The people still revered him. They still came, still offered, still sang. But the king of Israel had grown hollow. His crown was polished, his throne untouched. But his soul was worn thin. The scroll no longer opened for him. The ring no longer burned. It was still on his hand, gold and iron, carved with the celestial seal. But it felt like jewelry now. Not a weapon, not a covenant, just a reminder, a memory of what he once commanded and no longer understood. And then came the voice, not a whisper, not a vision, a voice clear, close, undeniable. It came as Solomon slept beneath the stars atop his own roof. The city stretched out below him like a dream too large to hold. "You called me last," it said. Solomon's eyes opened. Before him stood a figure, no flame, no smoke, no wings, just a man, tall, dark of robe, pale of face, and in his right hand a scroll of black parchment, longer than a man's height and written in blood that shimmered like oil. "I am Ephippus," he said, "the last of the 72. Oaths." Solomon sat up slowly. He did not reach for the ring. "You were not summoned. Has sent him. I was waiting," Ephippus replied, "waiting for the seal to dim." Oops, his presence was unlike the others. He did not hiss or sneer. He did not rage or kneel. He merely stood, still, eternal. Solomon rose. "What do you want?" Ephippus smiled faintly. "To fulfill your work." "Mees," the king stiffened. "What do you mean?" "I am the final stone," the spirit said. "The one that seals the temple not with walls, but with memory. I do not build. I record. Beating. See, men." He raised the scroll. It unfurled. The names of the 72 demons, written in their original tongues, flames, rivers, winds, beasts, wounds, and beside each, a mark, bound or broken, silenced or summoned, sealed or loosed. "You must inscribe the final name," Ephippus said. Solomon stepped forward. "Why would I do that?" "Because the work is not finished until all are accounted for," the spirit replied. "You bound us. You used us. You placed us beneath the house of holiness. You must now write the final line." Moses. Solomon looked down at the scroll. His name was already there, written in letters so precise. They looked carved by breath. He stepped back. "No," he whispered. Ephippus did not move. "It is not condemnation. It is truth. You are now part of the story. You are what stands between light and shadow." "Rico," Solomon clenched his fists. "I am no demon." "Minin." "No," Ephippus said softly. "But you once commanded them, and now you are remembered by them." It's God. The king felt it then, not anger, not fear, but weariness, the weight of decisions made, of temples built on broken stones, of prayers said with pride hidden beneath reverence. He reached for the scroll, but the moment his fingers touched it, the ring on his hand cracked. A faint sound like frost breaking on glass. He looked down. A fine fracture split through the seal. The scroll curled. The air shifted. Ephippus bowed not in obedience, but in farewell, and vanished. Solomon stood alone. The ring, his greatest gift, now broken. The scroll, once his shield, now closed. And below him, in the earth, he felt it, the stir of wings, the breath of things bound too long, the pulse of waiting. He did not call the priests. He did not summon the scribes. Instead, he returned to the temple one last time. He walked its halls in silence. He touched the stones he once commanded to move. He passed the basin, the altar, the veil. He stopped before the Holy of Holies. And for the first time since it was sealed, he wept, not for the loss of power, but for the gift he had not carried with enough fear. That night, he buried the ring beneath the altar. He left the scroll beside it, and in the quiet hours before dawn, Solomon, the man who once ruled demons, built the temple and spoke with angels, knelt not as king, but as sinner. He prayed a prayer no one recorded, but heaven heard. And below the stones, the spirits fell silent, for even they, in their hatred and pride, recognized what he had done. He had remembered who he was, and who he was not. Years passed. The temple stood unshaken, gold bright beneath the sun, marble cool beneath pilgrim feet. From Sheba to Sidon, travelers came to marvel, to pray, to speak of the king who had once commanded spirits and ruled without war. The name Solomon echoed across the lands like a sacred riddle wise, glorious, chosen. But behind the veil of incense and pageantry, few knew the truth, that the temple had not only been built by hands of flesh, but by those once cast out of heaven. The 72 were gone now, bound in silence, buried in stone, forgotten by the people, but not by their king. Solomon had changed. No longer did he walk in robes laced with gold, nor did he boast of mysteries solved. He had grown older, and with age, humility returned, not as shame, but as clarity. The ring, cracked and buried, remained untouched. The scroll remained sealed. The mirror shard was hidden. The spirits were silent. But silence is never empty. One evening, as twilight painted the city in silver and fire, Solomon stood upon the highest chamber of his palace, overlooking the house he had built. He saw the people praying, the Levites singing, the smoke rising in perfect columns, and yet his heart was unsettled. He felt it again, the breath behind the veil, the weight of a story left unfinished. He descended alone into the lowest chamber beneath the altar, the chamber that had once echoed with the voices of spirits. Now still, the stone box was there, the one sealed in gold and iron. He opened it. The ring was there, unchanged, still cracked. The scroll, curled like sleeping flame. The mirror shard, dark as a starless sky. And something new, a parchment thin, old, but not brittle. It had not been placed there by hand. It was simply there. Solomon unrolled it. There were no words, only a single symbol, a seal unknown to his scholars, but known to his soul. The seal of Metatron. He gasped. Metatron, scribe of heaven, voice of the divine, the one who records all things. The message was not in the symbol itself, but in its presence. He understood. The testament was not over. It had only been paused. He rushed back to his study, summoned his scribes, and began to dictate not the stories of his reign, not the psalms of his court, but the account of what had truly happened, the 72 spirits, the scroll of Michael, the ring of fire, the tools of the fallen, the angelic judgments, the whispers of Rahav, the revolts, the obsidian mirror, the last spirit, the final silence. They wrote for 7 nights, and on the 8th, the document was sealed. He called it the Testament of Solomon. He commanded it be hidden, not because it was forbidden, but because it was too easily misunderstood. Seal it beneath the archives, he said. Let it sleep until the world is ready to know the truth. When the line between heaven and earth trembles once more, and the old powers stir beneath the dust, then it may be read again. One freeze and tentry. The scribes obeyed. The scroll was locked in a copper box, buried beneath the eastern archives, guarded by symbols no man could read, and watched over by silence. And Solomon was at peace. He ruled for many more years. He built. He prayed. He failed. He repented. But he never wore the ring again. And when he died, the kingdom mourned. But the spirits did not stir. They remained quiet, waiting. Centuries passed. The temple would fall. The testament would vanish. But hidden in caves, whispered by mystics, guarded by winds and dust, the tale endured. A tale of a king, a ring, and a house built by shadows to house the light. And if ever it is read again, truly read, with fear and wonder, let the reader remember, even power given by heaven must be carried with trembling hands. The Testament of Solomon was buried, but its ripples never ceased. Centuries turned like pages in a scroll. Kingdoms rose and fell. The temple that had once been called indestructible was torn stone from stone. Its golden vessels melted, its sacred veil shredded by Roman hands. And yet, beneath the layers of ruin, smoke, and ash, something deeper remained. Not the temple itself, but its memory, its secret, the 72 names, once bound by Solomon's ring, lived on not in chains, but in whispers. Their symbols reappeared in grimoires copied by trembling hands. Their powers were invoked by mystics, often unknowingly. Their stories, fragmented, surfaced in Egyptian texts, in Greek incantations, in Babylonian tablets that bore marks long before Israel knew its own name. The Testament, though hidden, echoed through time. In Alexandria, a scribe dreamed of a scroll written in tongues of fire. In the deserts of Syria, a hermit carved angelic names into cave walls and claimed the shadows feared him. In Rome, an apostate whispered of a king who once made demons build a throne for God. Villian Dacadid, and always, the number returned. 72. It haunted Kabbalists and alchemists alike. They spoke of 72 divine names of God, 72 paths in the tree of life, 72 angels that stood watch over the nations. But none guessed that the same number marked the spirits Solomon had once bound. None remembered the pact. None, except those who still dwelled beneath. In the late hours of forgotten monasteries, a few dared to speak it aloud. The Ring of Solomon. The legends conflicted. Some said it was destroyed. Others said it had been hidden in the sands, guarded by jinn. Some claimed the ring still glows faintly beneath the dome of the rock, unseen by all but the desperate. Others believed it passed secretly from hand to hand, changing history one whisper at a time. And what of the scroll? A copy, possibly a fragment, was uncovered in the shadowed caves of Qumran. Its symbols unreadable. Its parchment resistant to decay. Scholars debated whether it was myth, forgery, or madness. But those who dared to study it reported strange dreams, visions of towering beings, of flaming swords, of a temple not built by men. And what of Solomon? To the world, he remains a paradox, a king of wisdom who became a warning, a builder of God's house who flirted with ruin, a prophet who lost his voice, but in hidden circles, in temples without names, in books without covers, he is remembered as the man who stood between worlds. Not saint, not sorcerer, something in between. The testament he dictated remains untranslated in full. The language resists decoding. Scholars complain of migraines. Machines malfunction, and ink vanishes from copied pages, as if the words themselves remember the seal. But once in a generation, someone sees it not with eyes, but with understanding. A child draws the ring in the sand, not knowing why. A prisoner prays a forgotten name and dreams of golden halls. A scholar hears a voice behind the silence of the page. And somewhere, beneath the dust of the earth, in a chamber untouched by time, the mirror shard still waits dark, sharp, watching, not because it hopes, but because it remembers. The testament of Solomon is not just a story of demons and angels. It is the story of a man given the authority of heaven and tested by the weight of it. And if ever the seal should shine again, if ever the ring should be lifted by another hand, let the one who carries it know this: what is built with power must be kept with fear. What is sealed by the word must never be broken by pride. And above all, he who commands the darkness must never forget the light.